Let's take the working file sales data 2016 pivot that deals with the same 2016 data we've already seen, but actually has a pivot table already in place. Now that pivot table has column headings that are countries. I've applied a filter, you can see the little filter icons on there, just so that we have less columns going across. So we're only seeing the values for Australia, England, Spain, United Kingdom, United States, and USA. Down the left, we are seeing all the years that sales have been made, and that's actually a group that we can then expand out to see the monthly totals within each year. So that's 2009 months. And if we choose on 2013, those are the 2013 months, and they go across and we see totals that each person has spent, or each country. The topic now is grand totals and subtotals. By default, you already get grand totals when you create a pivot table. So you can see here, each of our columns is totaled up at the bottom, and each of our rows is totaled up across. So we can see the total sales for any given year, so 2011 for example, 18.18 and 54 cents, or we can see the totals for any particular country. So we can go for Spain, 12.98, or United Kingdom, 5,528 and 45 cents. Now if you don't actually want totals on any one of your given pivot tables, you can turn them off. So although they're there by default, you can turn them off by making sure you're in the pivot table, doesn't matter where you are. Go to the pivot tables specific ribbon. Over here on the left, we have an options button that if we choose, we then get further options. So if we choose that, in the options for this particular pivot table, we have totals and filters. And here are our two ticks that are already in place. Show grand totals for rows, show grand totals for columns. If we don't want either or of those, we simply remove the ticks. Say I didn't want the grand totals for the rows, I would remove the tick and OK. And then the grand total disappears from the end here. That's options, totals and filters. Let's take the bottom column totals off as well, and then that bottom row goes. So they're all under options, which is in the drop down on options, or just click the options button there and it takes you straight in. Totals and filters, and you can either turn these little ticks off or these little ticks on. Okay. And that's what controls whether you get this grand total at the end or a grand total at the bottom for each of your columns and each of your rows. Now the subtotals is slightly different. That deals with each group. So here we're grouping by year. And if I wanted, for example, subtotals within here, you'll notice that when it's compressed, I get the subtotals. So I know that in 2009, United Kingdom spent $650. But when I expand, I don't see the subtotals. I just get the individual month totals. If I want to expand all of these in one go, I could just go down and click each of the pluses. Expanding a single year is clicking on the plus. Expanding multiple years, we can use this icon here on the pivot table tools ribbon. I just click plus there for expand, and that expands them all, and the little minus compresses them all. So you have these two icons to do all of the groups and condense all of the groups. But to do them a year at a time, a group at a time, we click the plus. And you can see that only then expands 2011. Now to get subtotals for each of these groupings, I simply select any value within the grouping and then field settings, still on the pivot tables ribbon. In the field settings, we have a section called subtotals and filters. Well, it's the subtotaling we're interested in. Currently it's none. I could choose automatic and effectively allow Excel to decide what summing function to carry out. And usually if it's numerical, it will choose sum. If it's text values, it will choose count. Or you can control it yourself. Let's say actually custom, and I want it to sum, or I want it to count, or average, or max, or min, or product, or count numbers, or standard deviation. Let's go with the straightforward sum. Okay, and then you can see the subtotals now appear even when the group is expanded. So if we choose 2010, 2010 expands, and we get the subtotal, the totals for 2010. Now notice they are at the top. If you wanted at the bottom of each group, which is sort of logical because you tend to add downwards, then you would go back to the field settings option, choose layout and print, and remove this little tick here that says display subtotals at the top of each group. And because you've chosen to have subtotals, the only place left for them to go is at the bottom. If I say OK, you can see we have 2010, each of the values, and then a sum for 2010. And if I scroll down, 2011, also at the bottom. If I expand out 2014, for example, it too will be at the bottom. The field setting is for the whole of that grouping, so the whole of the years in effect. If you quite like them at the top, go back into field settings, layout and print, put the tick back in, OK, and they are then back at the top of each grouping. You see 2014 and the totals, which sort of makes sense that they are on the same line. as the actual grouping name, but you don't have to have it that way. You're in charge of grand totals and subtotals. Grand totals are controlled by the options of the pivot table, whether you want them or not, for every single row or every single column. The subtotals are controlled by selecting the grouping that you're in and going to field settings, then controlling what kind of total you want to take place. It may be that I want the average, for example, not the sum. Okay, and then I get the average values at the top here. It is even possible to add more than one summing value. Under the same section, field settings, I could choose sum, I could choose count. So I've got 3 summing values there. Okay, and now they do end up at the bottom rather than the top, because it has to distinguish between them. So I've got 2010 sum, 2010 count, 2010 average, and the same for all the other years, because anything you add to any one of the groupings applies to all of them, because that is the field that you're setting the value for. 2009, for example, a sum, a count, and an average. That's field settings to control the individual grouping sums, calculations. It may be that we perhaps just want the 1. If you have the 1, you can then leave that to display at the top by leaving this tick in, or keep it at the bottom by removing that tick. Bear in mind, if you try for 2 or more calculations, they will always go to the bottom of the grouping anyway. So that's totals and subtotals within your pivot tables.